The sirens began just after midnight, slicing through the quiet of the city like a warning bell no one wanted to hear. For most Muscovites, this was a sound from another world, unfamiliar, unsettling, and deeply out of place in their city's routine. Confusion reigned in the streets and apartment blocks. Was it a drill, a technical malfunction, or something far more sinister? Neighbors whispered, phones buzzed with rumors, and uncertainty spread faster than the sirens themselves. Then, without warning, explosions shattered the night, lighting up the skyline with sudden, violent bursts. These were not distant echoes of war from the news. They were here, in the very heart of Moscow, echoing off familiar buildings and streets. The city's power grid was under attack. Substations, transformers, and control centers were hit with chilling precision, as if someone had mapped the city's veins and cut them one by one. Lights flickered, then died, plunging entire districts into a darkness so complete it felt suffocating. The city that never truly slept was suddenly blind. Traffic lights failed, the metro ground to a halt, elevators froze between floors. Chaos spread instantly, trapping thousands in a web of confusion and fear. The city's sense of invincibility, built over decades, vanished in mere minutes. People stumbled through hallways and streets, flashlights trembling in their hands, faces etched with disbelief. This was no accident. It was a calculated, deliberate strike on Moscow's most critical infrastructure, a message written in fire and darkness. The darkness was more than physical, it was psychological, a weapon that shattered the illusion of safety and left families huddled together, wondering what would come next. For the first time since World War II, Moscow felt truly vulnerable. Elderly residents recalled the terror of past blackouts, while the young experienced fear on a scale they'd never known. The war, once a distant headline or a rumor from the front, had arrived at their doorstep, unmistakable and inescapable. The night was alive with shouts, sirens, and the ominous mechanical buzz of more drones overhead. Every sound seemed to carry a new threat. Fear of the unknown gripped the city. Was this just the beginning, or would the next wave be even worse? No one could say. For the Kremlin, it was a nightmare realized, a direct challenge to Putin's authority and the social contract of stability that had held for so long. The blackout exposed the hollowness of propaganda and the uncomfortable reality that the war was spiraling out of control, far beyond the government's grasp. The government's promise of security was broken, and the people demanded answers, their anger and fear boiling over in the darkness. Moscow's darkness became a symbol of failure, a city once proud now shrouded in uncertainty and dread. The war was no longer going to plan. Command centers buzzed with frantic activity, but the sense of control was slipping away. The heart of the empire was now under siege, its power and prestige dimmed along with its lights. The city waited, breathless for dawn, hoping that with the first light, answers and perhaps a sense of safety would return. The attack on Moscow was born from Ukraine's own winter of darkness, a season that tested the very soul of the nation. Just days before, Russia had unleashed its harshest missile and drone barrage on Kyiv, targeting the city's vital energy infrastructure with relentless precision. The Kremlin's goal was clear: to break Ukrainian will by freezing the capital into submission, hoping that darkness and cold would do what bombs could not. Families huddled in cold, powerless apartments, relying on candles for light and hope. Hospitals ran on dwindling generators, doctors performing life-saving work by flashlight. Daily life in Kyiv ground to a halt, as shops closed and streets emptied, the city shrouded in an uneasy silence. Yet, the hardship only hardened Ukrainian resolve. Neighbors shared what little they had, volunteers braved the cold to deliver aid, and a spirit of unity emerged stronger than ever. President Zelensky took to the world stage, warning of Russia's campaign of energy terror and demanding more air defenses from allies. His pleas echoed far beyond Ukraine's borders. His message was unwavering. You can darken our cities, but not our spirit. Every blackout only strengthens our resolve. The people of Kyiv listened, and so did the world. The suffering forged a collective desire for justice and retribution. Candlelight vigils turned into rallies, and the city's pain became a rallying cry for action. Ukraine's leadership decided that the only way to deter Russia was to show that its own cities were vulnerable, that the pain could be felt on both sides. The calculus changed. No longer would attacks be limited to the battlefield. Ukraine would strike where it mattered most to the Kremlin. The Kremlin had to feel the pain it inflicted, to understand that escalation would not go unanswered. The plan to strike Moscow was audacious, risky, and a sign of Ukraine's growing confidence and capability. It was a message that Ukraine would not be cowed. Kyiv's message was clear: attacks on civilians would not go unanswered. The era of impunity was over. The decision marked a strategic shift. Ukraine would now project power deep into Russia, reaching targets once thought untouchable. The world watched as the war's front lines blurred, and the conflict entered a new, unpredictable phase. The attack on Moscow was not just retaliation, it was a warning, a signal that Ukraine would not remain passive in the face of aggression. Ukraine was no longer just defending, it was taking the fight to the aggressor, determined to shape its own destiny. The era of one-sided suffering was over. In the darkness, a new light of resistance and hope was born. Kyiv's winter of darkness had sparked a new phase of the conflict, one that would redefine the rules of engagement. The rules of war had changed, and so had Ukraine. Ukraine's response was a swarm, an audacious and meticulously planned operation that would change the course of modern warfare. Hundreds of long-range drones launched in coordinated waves, filling the night sky with a relentless, buzzing force that seemed almost unstoppable. Months of secret innovation and tireless engineering produced cheap, hard-to-detect UAVs capable of flying over 1,000 kilometers, farther than ever before and at a fraction of the cost of traditional missiles. The targets were carefully chosen: Moscow's sprawling power grid, the lifeblood of the city, not civilian homes or residential areas. Each drone carried enough explosives to cripple key infrastructure, designed to maximize disruption while minimizing collateral damage. By hitting dozens of critical nodes at once, Ukraine aimed to overwhelm the entire system, triggering cascading failures that would ripple across the Russian capital. Russia's air defenses, built for intercepting missiles and bombers, were saturated and outmatched by the sheer number and unpredictability of the drones. Some drones were inevitably shot down, falling in fields or exploding mid-air, but most broke through the defenses, reaching their targets. Inside Russian command bunkers, officers watched helplessly as their radar screens filled with incoming threats, unable to stop the onslaught. The operation was a stunning testament to Ukraine's military evolution, showcasing new tactics and technologies that caught Russia off guard. Kyiv was no longer just defending its territory, it could now strike deep inside Russia, projecting power in ways previously thought impossible. The attack sent a clear message to Moscow and the world: there were no longer any safe havens, not even in the heart of Russia. The technological gap was closing rapidly, with Ukraine now setting the pace and forcing Russia to adapt to a new era of warfare. The era of a one-sided conflict was over. Ukraine's drone strike marked a turning point, signaling a future where innovation and resilience could tip the balance of power. The blackout brought not just darkness, but fear. Muscovites, long insulated from war, now faced its reality. Panic spread, every loud noise sparked anxiety. The war was no longer distant, it was a threat overhead. The blackout erased social divisions. Everyone was cold, scared, and disconnected. With the internet down, rumors replaced information, fueling paranoia. Some feared more attacks, others whispered of martial law. The government's silence deepened public distrust. State media's narrative of Russian strength crumbled as drones filled the sky. For some, patriotism hardened. For many, doubt took root. The attack forced Muscovites to confront the truth. The Kremlin's promises were empty. The fear was not just of drones, but of the lies exposed. Moscow's psychological walls had been breached. Kyiv's response was calculated ambiguity, no direct claim, but satisfaction was clear. Zelensky's advisor posted, "Karma is a boomerang." Zelensky addressed the nation vowing, "No aggressor will find safety, our darkness will not last, but for the terrorists, it's just beginning." The speech rallied Ukrainians and warned Moscow without escalating further. In Moscow, officials denied the scale of the attack, blaming technical malfunctions. State TV showed heroic firefighters, avoided the word attack, and promised quick restoration. But social media videos and widespread outages contradicted the official line. Behind closed doors, the Kremlin was furious. Putin convened an emergency meeting, condemning terrorist methods and promising harsh retaliation. Propagandists demanded escalation, but the damage to Moscow's prestige was done. The blackout exposed the regime's vulnerability. The official narrative was a flimsy shield for a deep wound. The world saw through the denial. The Kremlin's aura of control was shattered. The drone attack marked a turning point. The war had come home. For years, Russians saw the conflict as distant. Now, it was exploding over their capital. Putin's promise of security was broken. The war brought only fear. The Kremlin's narrative collapsed as the threat became real. Public anxiety surged, and the desire for the war's end spread beyond dissidents. The blackout revealed the limits of Russian power and the vulnerability of its people. The Moscow strike changed the war's balance. Ukraine now had a credible deterrent. Russian cities were no longer safe. This was not Western technology, but homegrown innovation. Cheap drones overwhelmed expensive defenses, rewriting the rules of modern warfare. Russia faced a dilemma: escalate and risk more attacks, or de-escalate and admit Ukraine's strength. Air defenses had to be diverted home, weakening Russia's front lines. The drone strike forced the Kremlin to rethink its entire strategy. The blackout paralyzed Moscow. Power, transport, and daily life collapsed. The crisis exposed the city's fragility and mirrored what Ukrainians had endured. Blame and resentment grew. Online forums filled with angry questions. The war's cost became personal, no longer abstract, but a daily hardship. Morale plummeted as propaganda rang hollow. The disconnect between official narrative and reality eroded trust. Open protest was rare, but quiet resentment spread. Putin's image of competence was shattered. The blackout struck at the heart of the regime's bargained stability for obedience. The cracks in the home front were spreading. The night Ukraine turned off Moscow's lights was a turning point. The war was no longer one-sided. Ukraine had changed the rules. For Ukraine, it was a morale boost and a new deterrent. For Russia, it shattered the illusion of security and exposed deep flaws. The West watched with admiration and anxiety, fearing escalation. The risk of miscalculation grew. The blackout signaled a new, unpredictable phase. Russian territory was no longer a sanctuary. The darkness over Moscow illuminated the perilous path ahead.